This is the Parents in Sport podcast. Amazing guests, honest conversations, topics that matter.
Welcome to season 3 of the Parents in Sport podcast. I am your host, Gordon MacLelland. I'm delighted to be joined today by Olympian, author and director of mentoring at the True Athlete Project, Laurence Halsted. Laurence, thank you for joining us on the show.
It's a pleasure, Gordon. Nice to be here.
Yeah, it's great to finally get you on, having seen so much of your work from afar via social media and obviously digging into the book that you wrote. But can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, I was an athlete. I was a fencer in the UK on the world-class program for about 10 years or so. Competed in the London and Rio Olympic Games. In between those games, I actually moved to Denmark. I met my now wife on a trip away and moved over here in 2013. And I retired after Rio, and I took on 2 roles. I took on a full-time job as the performance director of the Danish Fencing Federation. So I moved straight from being an athlete into a performance director role, albeit in a small federation. But I also took on a voluntary role as kind of running this mentoring program for the True Athlete Project. So they were kind of they were happening side by side for the last 5 years. And I've just, actually the end of last year, I left my job as the performance director and moved over into a part-time paid role in the True Athlete Project, which is a charity based in the UK, and we do some, and in the US as well. So that's kind of been a wonderful journey to help build up this charity and especially this mentoring program, and then have it kind of take over and be more of my career path than just a voluntary role.
Yeah, there's something really rewarding about mentoring, particularly when we've been involved in sport and giving something back, I guess. You know, I take it you're enjoying that role.
Yeah, but it's an incredibly powerful dynamic, mentoring itself, even without anything else around it. Just having an older experienced person working with a younger person coming up, it makes such an incredible impact on both parties. So I've had my own experiences as a mentor in my career, but just seeing kind of all these kind of putting together all these mentoring pairs, it's just an amazing thing to hear the feedback, to see the journey these guys are on. So it's incredibly rewarding.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, tell us a little bit more, about your book, but also about the True Athlete philosophy. I know you've alluded to the True Athlete Project a number of times. And what were your motivations behind writing the book?
Yeah, so the book is basically a distillation of the philosophy of the charity, and we're quite a special charity. We have obviously we have a philosophy that can fill out a whole book. Really, it's based on this idea that we believe sport can be an incredible force for good in the world at all levels, for the individuals involved, for communities, for society as a whole. But way too often, it's not living up to that kind of proposition. And in fact, the reality is that it can be an incredibly negative force on the world, on individuals' experiences, from kind of PE classes all the way up to elite high performance settings, to communities, to society, and kind of on the top end level. There are all sorts of kind of negative side effects of sport being organized and played. So we kind of, the True Athlete Project was created by a quite visionary founder, Sam Parfit, in the US, and then moved organization more over to the UK recently. And the mission is to create a more compassionate culture through sport. And we do that by designing, delivering a range of programs at all levels of sport, from schools and community clubs up to national federations, and working with Olympians, Paralympians. All kind of, we call them mindfulness-based programs, but they have mindfulness running through everything as a thread. But it's kind of coach development work, athlete workshops, mindfulness classes for athletes, whole organizational work with NGBs, with all this kind of their athletes, their coaches, their staff, And then I run this mentoring program, which matches elite Olympian and Paralympian level athlete mentors with young up and coming athlete mentees. And they work together for a whole year with our kind of curriculum as a kind of touching again, working with a curriculum all the way through. So the book it sets out the true athlete philosophy, which kind of starts with this introduction about what sport can be and what we need. We need athlete development to be kind of part and parcel of developing well-being and developing core kind of character traits and skills, as well as kind of promoting this idea of athletes giving back to their community, that's part and parcel of what it is to be an athlete. That's what we define as a true athlete, is somebody who develops themselves through sport and with an idea to give back to their society, to their community. And it's shifting away from just being in sport to get medals, to get results, to be the best kind of sports person. That's part of it. Performance is absolutely part of it, but this more rounded idea of what it is to be an athlete. So we introduce the 4 true athlete virtues, kind of drawing on philosophy, kind of ancient philosophy here, but around integrity, responsibility, compassion, and awareness. And then the last part of the book is all these kind of strategies and tools and perspectives that you can adopt in order to underpin those 4 athlete virtues, true athlete virtues.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic project. I'm guessing, I'm just playing devil's advocate here, not that I believe this for the record while people are listening, but I'm guessing you still see elements of pushback across organisations, maybe pushback from coaches, that they think that it could potentially this be a little bit fluffy and that this could be a detriment to actually achieving elite performance, which couldn't be any further from the truth, because they can both go hand in hand. We can still be challenging, it can still be tough, it can still have these things, but it can have a far greater meaning. Is that a fair statement? Yeah,
we definitely see some resistance throughout the system. And I mean, it makes sense. The traditional culture of sport is one that is win at all costs. It's result obsessed. So anything that's not about kind of driving towards that end goal of the gold medal is seen as superfluous or not relevant or even distracting from the main job. And just all the evidence that we see, everything we know about human behavior, human motivation, points in the other opposite direction, that happier, healthier athletes will perform better. And actually having other things in your life as part of your identity helps take a bit of the kind of pressure off some of that anxiety. That performance anxiety is lessened by knowing that your entire sense of self is not on the line every time you step on the pitch or on the court. That's incredibly beneficial, just kind of from a psychological perspective. So there's every reason to believe that this is a far more powerful way to set sport up. But there are still plenty who they've had success from the traditional model. That's often the way, that they've been through the traditional approach. It's worked for them. So obviously that's the only way that it should work for everybody else. And there's quite blinkered views. Actually, what we see as well, where there's resistance, it can be worked through. There's very little resistance, which just puts it up and just won't shift at all. When you kind of describe, especially around mindfulness, for example, which lots of people just have this idea of this fluffy kind of hippie thing. When you talk through them, what it's about, and it's about concentration training and controlling your emotions and kind of being aware of what's happening right now and in the present moment, it's linked to being in the zone and in flow, then it becomes obvious that this is connected to performance. It also happens to have incredible well-being, mental health benefits. So we haven't come across too much resistance that can't be talked through. But it requires that it's slightly deeper work. It's not just a 2-hour workshop and then everyone's got it. You need these kind of relationships. You need to build this up and kind of build up the trust and talk things through like this. Yeah, and the reason I think you and I have got on so well off air, I guess, is the fact that the work we do with parents follows similar models, because actually alongside striving to potentially be
professional athletes achieving the very best in sport and those things that go with it, there has to be a far bigger success criteria. Otherwise, we're going to end up with an awful lot of very disappointed people and an awful lot of young people mentally unwell, where their identities are so attached to just being involved in that sport. And when I talk to parents, the only way that I can sell has it been worth it is if they have used the journey to equip the children with this wide range of character and life skills that will allow them to thrive in whatever walk of life they end up in. And not because I'm fluffy, not because I'm not competitive in any way. I'm the most competitive person. I still believe in it being tough at times and challenging in the things to do it. But I do believe there's a place for that greater holistic development around young people. And I do believe that whilst harnessing a lot of those skills, we will see that it will lead to really good outcomes in terms of achieving those results as well. I do believe they're linked.
And nowhere is it more evident than these kind of statistics that are coming out around football academies, where something like 0.001% of players going to an academy will make it to a first team, make it to a professional contract. So you've got 99.99% of the people going through an academy who are going to drop out at some point before they're 20, let's say. What's then the job of the academy leaders, the coaches there? They want to create the best footballers they can, but they know that the vast, vast majority of them are going on to other things that is not football. So how could their success criteria be limited to, we made this first team contract, we got this player to the first team, when if they're ignoring the experience, the development of all those others aside from football? Because if they're not going to be footballers past the age of 18 or 20, you want to give them some experience, some development that helps them in life. Otherwise, it's a terrible tragedy. And it has been. I mean, that's been pointed out now that academy systems have been a bit of a tragedy. But it's just so stark there that our responsibility in talent development as parents, as coaches, is to provide an experience, to provide development, as well as the sporting kind of development.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I am pleased to say we work with a number of football academies, and I think people are starting to become a lot more aware with this, and actually probably almost start by being a little bit more realistic. I think from a sports parenting point of view, understanding what our dreams are, they're not the same as our expectations, about what our expectations should be or what we should be having high expectations of. And as you say, being a professional sports person or winning the Olympic gold medal completely narrows the success criteria. And if everything else is failure, then it makes it really difficult for any of us to take any joy in anything. And, I've personally been through that system. My son signed a contract at the age of 9, was released at 13. And as a parent, luckily, I knew that I had more chance of being hit by a meteor than him playing Premier League football for that club. And thankfully, we kept other interests going. We looked at the holistic side of it, and he still plays loads of sport at a decent level and still enjoys it. But I think we have got a bigger responsibility. And what you said there, that tiny percentage, I know we've done some work recently where we've used the holiday brochure as a really good example to this, where the holiday brochure sells us the sea, it sells us the beaches, the suns and the amazing hotel, and it's just absolutely fantastic. And then you get this little white bar at the bottom that says something like, oh, your plane might crash, or you may be ill, this minutest little bit of detail that nobody wants to see. But actually in a sports context, that's what should be in the main part of the brochure. And the little white bar at the bottom should be, oh, and by the way, you might be a professional or you might win an Olympic gold medal. So there has to be that change in narrative, not because you're being grumpy or you don't want people to dream. I mean, I would certainly never tell my children this, but surely as adults and people involved in the sport, we've all got a greater responsibility to play in that messaging.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to take it a step further and link it back to what we're talking about in this book, So there, we also tend to focus even holistically around character development in sport on quite particular athletic traits like teamwork, like kind of determination and hard work. And what we're pointing out as well is that they're quite limited in themselves. So you could become a world champion with these traditional athletic traits. And yet we've seen lots of people even making it to top level, to being Olympic champion, and still feeling kind of bereft or just left kind of empty and unfulfilled, which is crazy, because even that shiny brochure that's selling you this dream, you can achieve it, and it's still nothing like it was sold to you as. So we're kind of proposing that there are these where these true athlete virtues fit in, is that they're so often missing. The idea of compassion or integrity is kind of overlooked again as kind of soft or fluffy or unnecessary to the real hard skills of making it in sport. But really, they're the things that are essential to a happy, fulfilled, healthy life and person, and also have incredible benefits to the sporting performance as well. So it goes even further to say that you can make it and still be left without that sense of fulfillment. So we're even more kind of double down on what is it that we need to teach these young athletes or develop these young people in.
Yeah, and parents have got a key role to play as well, because in the development of these skills and valuing them, parents need to be seen to be valuing them and helping harness them, just like teachers do, just like coaches do, just like anybody involved in shaping those environments. Because, if we don't value those bits that are going on alongside it, then we can't expect our children to value them. And maybe, as you say, that's why they do end up bereft even after achieving the pinnacle within their sports. Do you think that the public have lost a little bit of confidence in the running and ethics of elite sport? I mean, obviously, sport's still portrayed amazingly by the media, and we all absolutely love a good success story, and we all tune into our Netflix documentaries. And yes, of course, we watch them and think, oh, yeah, that's not great. But we seem to be able to bury it quite quickly and move on to the next one, or wait and see this amazing sort of story, I guess. But do you think there's been a loss in confidence?
Yeah, undoubtedly there has, and there's some quite good kind of statistics around people's perceptions, especially in football, around FIFA, for example. That, I mean, their levels of respect or kind of trust in FIFA is rock bottom because of all the corruption scandals, and it's incredible. But that's spread out also across kind of the IOC and other kind of international organizations. It's just undermining what it can be, and the fact that sport stands for these incredible lofty values of fair play and kind of teamwork and all of these amazing things, and those that are running them, the likes of FIFA, the IOC, UEFA, the Premier League, whoever it is, there's so much power in them being the most upstanding in these values, of really kind of living them and driving them. And yet they don't, and it really undermines the impact that sport can have. And then on top of that, you have very, very specific things. That's just about kind of the perception of what they stand for. But when you have kind of mega sporting events, the World Cup in Dubai, is it?
Qatar, yeah.
Qatar, yeah. And the Olympics in Rio, and like all the kind of negative side effects of these sporting events, and it's not just undermining the perception of it, but it's actually significantly kind of negatively affecting people's lives, and huge costs for the Olympics, huge costs on the host cities, corruption, meaning that their public funding is just flowing into private hands, these kind of slave workers in Qatar that are dying at an incredible rate whilst building this amazing infrastructure for the World Cup. So there's just, one side is the perception of these kind of organizations, but the other is that their actions are negatively impacting the environment and human lives. And that's just an absolute travesty. We can't look away from that. Those organizations have to be the kind of front runners. They have to be leading the way and showing what sport can be. And they're not. Right now, it's the grassroots that are leading the way, I think. And We need far better leadership from the top.
Yeah, I mean, they have the greatest power and the greatest impact and the greatest pull, as you say. It's all very well, some amazing little pockets of work going on, but we all know when these guys speak, people, stand up and listen. So they have got a big responsibility. And, sports is still such a powerful force in helping bring society together. I see that every week going to watch teams play, and, I'll be there again watching Liverpool this weekend, and it just brings everybody together for a common goal. And, what do you think sport needs to do to maximise, the impact of that? Obviously beyond just watching teams play, but actually how they can benefit all their communities around them.
Yeah, well, that's a big question, because it addresses every level of sport. I mean, there's changes that need to happen right down from physical education in schools, which is deprioritized, defunded. It's the first thing to kind of get funding cut whenever there's tightening of belts. The experience of teachers are not given the right training, or you can't hire in proper PE trained teachers. So the experience of sport right from the start is so often negative or just not inspiring. And I mean, the reason sport is so impactful, is so important to us, is not because of these global stars and Olympics and World Cups. They're rosy kind of cherries on the top. It's about participation in sport for as long in your life as possible. That's where we get the most benefit: health benefit, mental health benefit, community. Yeah, it's great to go to watch a game with your friends or kind of in the stadium, but there's nothing compared to taking part in a sport every Saturday, every weeknight, whatever it is, throughout your long life. So we need to make changes we need to prioritize differently in society to keep people in sport. Right now, something like 50% of kids are dropping out of formal sport by the age of 13, I think it is. And in America, it's even worse. And then they don't come back to it ever. That's the tragedy. I mean, if we just focus on that, like, how do we change that? That will make the biggest impact. And then kind of as you move up into kind of talent development and elite level sport, there's a moral responsibility to make those environments healthy and not kind of breaking people down and burning them out. And also and that comes with like we're presenting in our philosophy, kind of a reimagining of what sport can be as a training ground for personal development, good mental health, and kind of becoming a good role model in society. That's what sport should be kind of repositioned as. And then right on the top level, as we've talked about, we have to have leadership from the top, kind of leadership with integrity. And I was just thinking that kind of how the impact that those massive organizations can have. It's always grated on me that McDonald's is one of the primary sponsors of the Olympics. And then you extrapolate that to any other kind of terrible, fossil fuels or whatever it is sponsoring these global events. But the idea that elite sport can go hand in hand with a brand like McDonald's is absurd. It's the least aligned with elite sport that you can find in terms of the food industry. So what a difference that can make if the Olympics, the IOC sponsored, partnered or broke that tie and partnered with somebody that was actually aligned with healthy living. So just an example there. But I think actually the focus, and especially for our conversation, that focus on the experience of sport at school club level is so vital. And that requires a changing of our kind of value system. I think that we'll both agree just how important it is to have great sporting experiences in your youth. And we just don't, especially in sport, in education, we don't value it like that. We value traditional kind of subjects, and sport and art, music, drama, they're the first things to go. That's a crying shame, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's certainly, I think, ultimately for sports, cut the talent pool as well, because I think those that are perhaps in public school education are still able to get those opportunities far easier than people who are perhaps in the state system. I was just thinking away there when you were talking about McDonald's as the sponsor. It just reminded me of a very funny story from a few years ago when my son was playing in his football academy. And it was brilliant because you got something about nutrition. about, how we should fuel our children and how it was important that we got it right after games and everything else. And then in the car park of the said football academy was your typical burger, egg and bacon van, right in the middle of it. So where you've probably got a lot of parents who are struggling to get the concept of perhaps being able to afford healthier food, perhaps being able to have the time to cook it, perhaps having those other pressures. What do we do right in front of people after saying that we need to be healthy and fuel our kids? Well, let's put the most unhealthy thing right under everybody's noses and make life easier. And it's just something that's always sort of amused me. And I was talking to a doctor the other week who said, they're having real issues with obesity, people coming in with health issues. And opposite this lovely new practice that's been built, they've put a KFC. So basically, they drive out of their lovely practice, which is promoting all this thing, straight into what would be the exact opposite. It's very similar to what you're saying about the way we align sponsorship and the way we align brands, because those big organisations, they carry so much power, and people are influenced by them.
And I mean, if you're looking at social impact through sport, you don't have to go any further than obesity rates or diabetes rates, and what significant impact they would have to keep people on average in sport for one more year of their life, for example. It would be hugely impactful on the health service, on kind of the economy, and then you extrapolate that. If we can imagine a society where people and 80% of people are in sport their lifelong, because the offer is so great and the experiences are so great, it would transform everything about society almost. I mean, in sense of community, in sense of physical and mental health. I mean, that's really where we could be focusing all of our energy and getting so much bang for the buck.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got some good examples, haven't we? I mean, some of the Scandinavian countries, I think, have gone some way to maybe getting that far. I think we're a bit behind in westernized society, or even perhaps in some Eastern societies where we work as well. That's a bit further from where we perhaps want to be. And obviously all these things are going to take lots of time. If we look at things now, you're a parent, you've got children involved in sport, which is amazing. Well done for getting them out there and getting them involved and giving them those opportunities. What do you think parents need to be aware of in terms of their support of their young people? Is it just keep providing them those opportunities, keep encouraging them, obviously enjoy winning, but don't get too hooked on outcomes, and back to those, I guess, those character skills and development that we were talking about earlier?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've just hit all the nails on the head of what's most important here. Is the long game, really. That's the most important thing, not whether they're winning on a Saturday or whether they're making the team this season or not. It's just how can they can have an experience where they're enjoying it and they want to stay in longer. And that could be trying different sports, keep on sampling things until they hit on what they like. It can be those conversations in the car afterwards, so that you're holding those in a way that they appreciate and not kind of making things worse for them if they're struggling after a game or whatever. Just having this idea of the value of sport is not as you said, it's not in the results. It's not in how high they're achieving. It's in how they're experiencing it and how they're developing through it. And you can get incredible development through the challenge, through all the negative sides of sport. They can still develop incredible skills through. So that's it's not something to shy away from, that they're not selected or that they lose a match. Just kind of recognize that their growth as a person is what's important here, and their positive experience. That doesn't just mean smiling and happy all the time, just that they're content, they like what they're doing, and generally in the long term they'll choose to be there. That's the key thing.
Yeah, how were your mum and dad, Laurence, going through the system? How were your parents with you and their sport? Did they learn as they went? Did you teach them? Did they have different views when it set out? How was your experience as well?
I didn't have to teach them much. They were both Olympic fencers themselves.
Okay. So,
So
yeah, but that doesn't mean they necessarily followed your philosophy here, though. Just
no,
no, because
they
they
were,
would have been brought up in that era.
yeah, they were good. They had different approaches. I remember it being really positive that they were supportive, entirely supportive, and and generally not heaping on pressure. Although I ended up having to ban my dad from coming to competitions because for all his best intentions, he couldn't hide his kind of his facial expressions and like the anxiety and nerves, and like I saw disappointment if I didn't do anything. I don't think he felt it, but I just I didn't want my mum was fine because she didn't want to watch me anyway. She had to be in a different room. She got too nervous, so she was nowhere near it. So she could be there. But my dad, I had to ban him from coming, and that worked out fine in the end. I think generally they towed a good line of being as supportive for anything I needed, driving me where I wanted to go and to training every day and that kind of thing, but not making me feel like it was for them that I was doing it, that I always had a choice. But yeah, I had a slightly different experience with such experienced parents in the sport.
Yeah, and I'm sure that there'll be lots of parents listening where the approaches of mum and dad are very, very different. You know, I was talking to Alex Matthews, the England women's rugby player, the other day, and she was saying, you know, mum and dad were incredibly supportive, but very supportive in different ways. Mum's was a little bit more helpful, dad's less so. Now that was Alex's view, but she said dad massively cared for her and was supportive and wanted to be successful. But just like you've alluded to there, sometimes in that care, love, support, it doesn't quite look that way to the child who's competing.
Yeah, and actually, another thing that really strikes me from my experience that I might be relevant for some people. One of the things that I loved most about the reason I was so happy doing it was that I could get away from my parents. From the age of 14 or something, I was going on trips abroad for competitions, training camps, just with the coach and with my mates, and that was amazing. Like I see so many parents traveling with their kids these days to competitions wherever it is, at home or abroad, and I just think who's choosing that? Maybe the kid finds it a bit easier. The parents pay for everything, all of that. But really, there was so much growth in me just being out with my mates. The coach was, we had lovely coaches, so they kind of mostly left us to ourselves. We got into a bit of trouble, but nothing too serious. We had to kind of look after ourselves at that age, not in a rogue way, but just we had to be a bit more self-sufficient. And I think it's a brilliant way. That's a brilliant way to help your kids, is to give a bit of distance, to not turn up to every competition, not be there with handing them food every time they need it or their bottle of water. Let them deal with it themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because you're not always there, are you? And actually, that self-organization piece is one of the big traits that we talk to parents about, and how we give them that responsibility to take that on. And as you say, that's one way of potentially doing it. You know, I think we can become guilty of micromanaging everything, being overly involved, but actually, you know, when children are getting to those teenage years, they're not that parents don't continue to have a major influence, but children are more swayed by what their peers are doing and like to be in different environments where they can find their own identities. They can start to express themselves without being worried about what mum and dad might say, and grow as a person. And that's really, really important. You know, it's absolutely critical. I wonder why, I'm just thinking out loud, I wonder why that is, that we always have to be there. Is it we just love it so much and enjoy watching? Is it that we need to feel needed as mum and dad? Is it
Showing love, showing support,
yeah,
all good reasons for wanting to be there.
yeah, I think it's an awareness thing for me, isn't it? Because even having these conversations, and even, you know, if I spoke to parents about this in a workshop, you know, someone would be like, oh, yeah, never really thought about it like that. I think it's just bringing these conversations out into the open. And, you know, ultimately you find what will work. You know, there's no as I say, a magic solution. You'll find what will work best for you and your young person in your context. But being aware of some of the options, I think it's really important.
I think it's always coming from a good place. Parents want to be helpful, supportive, show that they're there for their kids. So that's also why they'll go out and get the food. They'll hand it to them. They'll make sure they're eating and drinking. That's helpful. But I always appreciated, as a performance director, I appreciated those parents who could be there and just be there to clap and support and little else, just in kind of moral support. And then everything else is on the kid. I mean, from the age of 13, 14, they should be able to deal with it themselves, to kind of get their own food and figure out when they need to eat. And maybe it won't be optimal. It doesn't have to be. They'll be learning as they go. So there's definitely a question of, like, do I need to be at every game every time? And then just when I'm there, how much of it is trying to show that I'm supportive, and how much of it can I let go to them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a fascinating piece. The more I work with parents, the more I believe that it's about presenting scenarios, telling stories, presenting options, raising self-awareness. Not necessarily a right or wrong to every approach. It's not as straightforward as that, but giving people the tools to make really healthy decisions for both themselves and their young people. Because, if we had the crystal ball and the magic solution, you and I wouldn't be sat here now. We'd be millionaires saying that's the recipe for glory, and as yet nobody's come up with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so fascinating. What do you remember about being a young athlete, and what do you remember what inspired you the most about sport? Do you remember your earliest experiences? What was it that really appealed to you to obviously go on the amazing journey that you did?
I remember quite well my early years. I had a bit of a funny experience. I most liked competing, but I also suffered the most because I really hated losing. I mean, to a point where I was crying after every time I lost in competitions. And training wasn't so much fun. So I was a really competitive kid, obviously. And then it was only later on in my kind of teens that I started really appreciating the training as well. I played all sorts of sports all the way through my kind of school years. So I played a lot of rugby and football and all those kinds of other things alongside fencing kind of the whole way through. So I just loved the team aspects of rugby and football, especially rugby. That kind of camaraderie was a huge draw for me. I guess, I mean, that was the part of school that I appreciated the most. The games times, the PE times that's what I wanted to do the most. So it was always just something I was going to be doing all my life anyway. So, and then I had good coaches, especially in fencing. I had an amazing coach who really inspired joy in the sport. And he's quite incredible that he was my first coach in a kids club, Saturday afternoon club at the age of 7. He's a Polish guy who'd come to the UK, kind of was a top level fencer. And then he was also my coach all the way up to my first Olympics as well. And he was one of the best, if not the best coach in the UK. So an amazing guy who has an equal ability to inspire a 7-year-old as a 30-year-old Olympian.
Fantastic. Incredible.
Yeah, combination.
You need to give him a shout out. Who's the coach, Laurence? You have to let people know who he is.
He's called Ziemek Wojciechowski. And yeah, quite an incredible chap, and he's still going. He's in his mid-70s, but he's as active as he ever was.
Yeah, and look, and I think even in that response, you've said two of the main reasons why lots of children play, isn't it? It's the teammates, the friendships, and amazing coaching and amazing environments, because that's ultimately what keeps you going back. I'm conscious of the time, so this is my final a question to you about everything we've sort of talked about. I believe that we can have high performance environments with high well-being at the core. So human first, athlete second. You obviously agree. What do we do next? How do we get there?
Oh, another big question. How do we make system-wide change?
Where do we start then? What's the first stages?
I think we have to start with the coaches. I think you're doing a fantastic job working with parents, because coaches and parents, they're the most significant kind of impact on a young athlete's experience of sport will come through those adults around them. So we need coaches and parents to be trained in how to create those experiences, and that comes with a philosophical underlay of what is the value, what's the point of sport. That's why we created this book, and why it has to start there. You have to see what the value of sport is in that development, in lifelong joy of sport, and then that lays out what you need to do for the sessions, or what kind of coach development there is important. There's a far more emphasis now, and it needs to be more emphasis for coach development on the mental, emotional kind of realm of sport, of coaching. Traditionally, it's been far more technical, tactical, and psychological stuff is kind of left to somebody else, but there isn't anybody else. There's no, the vast majority of clubs and teams and schools, there's no sports psychologist. Even at the top level, there's some, but not enough. So that's connects to the kind of how to motivate people without punishing them, or without threatening them or embarrassing them, that kind of thing. Like, you get most out of motivation through kind of having autonomy, and them being able to choose themselves, and connecting to other people, and feeling a sense of improvement, of mastery. So that coach development, I think, is so essential, and that also requires some more value placed on the role of the coach, of the PE teacher and the coach in society, more kind of more respect for them and for their role, but also funding for that. It's an incredibly tough job to be a coach, and especially if you're asked to also be an expert in psychology and emotions and everything else on top of the technical aspects of the sport. Obviously, you don't have to be the expert, but to have an understanding of that, to create these environments that we really need to uplift kids, kind of instill that sense of joy, and not kind of beat them down slowly. So I think that's probably my first port of call is in those people that really craft the environments, and making sure that they're great places to be.
Yeah, fantastic, Laurence. What a great response of what was a potentially huge question. You managed to do that, brilliantly answering that in less than 2 minutes. Laurence, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Parents in Sport podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Gordon. Yeah, real pleasure talking.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll be able to get you on again, and maybe dig a little bit deeper as the work develops in this space. So we look forward to seeing you again soon, and certainly when the podcast's released, we look forward to sending our viewers towards your book and a little bit more about the True Athlete project. So thank you very much.
Thank you for listening. Check us out at parentsinsport.co.uk.